Alright, so before we begin with anything very hard, we're going to look at learning just for a second. I know students try to watch the entire video and then try to do an action, and they'll forget every time. So this little thing you should do throughout this entire series: play, pause, do. Okay? You'll play the video. I'll end up doing something, so you pause it, and then you do it. Okay? Play, pause, do throughout the entire video. In other words, if I, let's say, take this object and move it, you don't have to move it the same way, but you should pause the video and try to move it. Okay? If I rotate something in the video, you should pause the video and then you try to rotate it. Play, pause, do. If I introduce a tool, you should pause the video and then play with that tool over and over again before you go on in the video. Alright, so below this video is a link, and that link should have a file that looks like this. So your first mission is to find the file, and then you can open it in two different ways. You can either double click it to open it in Blender, or you can just go File, Open, and this is a navigation for your computer. I saved it to the desktop. You might have it in Downloads, and it is called House Start Period Blend. Okay? House Start Period Blend. And you just open that up and it should look like this. So that's your first mission. Alright, just like a video game, you have to know the controls for this. So let's look at the controls first. Click the middle mouse button. This allows you to rotate. Okay, that middle mouse button allows you to rotate. Hold Shift, middle mouse button, allows you to pan. Okay. And then the wheel mouse, it's actually a middle mouse button, but the wheel on it allows you to zoom in and out. Okay, that takes several minutes to get used to. Before you even start this project, I would practice kind of like just doing this little thing where you're being able to like zoom in on something, zooming out on something, panning the scene. Like maybe I want to zoom in on this object. Okay, I can quickly do that. Can you? Try that first. Alright, along with being able to use this feature, pan, rotate, and zoom, we also have this little widget up here, and you're going to be utilizing this widget a lot. It allows you to switch into different views, like let's say the top view, okay, or the left-hand view. And you can mouse over these and see what view it's actually going to go to. Okay, in this case the Z view allows you to view the top view of things, and you can also look over here, it's labeled. This will come in handy later on as you're moving things around in your scene, so please revisit this little widget anytime you want to go back to this view. You could just click the middle mouse button, or I can go in the absolute top of it, or back. Just practice that for a little bit. You'll notice a word called orthographic here. Okay, there's also an icon here. This allows you to switch between perspective and orthographic. When we model or move any object within the scene, we tend to do that in orthographic mode. Whenever we render something or finalize something, we go into perspective. So stay in orthographic. Now every once in a while this will switch over. Let's say I close out the program, reopen it. It will switch to perspective. You'll do a little bit of a struggle fest because perspective is very difficult to view things in my humble opinion, compared to orthographic. So check this icon and check this word every once in a while to make sure that it's in orthographic mode while you're editing the scene. Alright, now that we know how to move the scene around a little bit, let's go to moving objects in the scene. We got move and rotate. Okay? Again, scale is not going to be used within this lesson. So here's your buttons, move and rotate. I can go over here and let's say grab a hold of any object by left clicking on it. Click on it and you notice you have these little arrows. You can click on the arrow and it allows you to move that object based upon that direction. Now the tricky thing about 3D is, let's say I move it back, okay? I now have to move my scene around to see where I rotated. So you're always going to be moving, rotating, moving, rotating to see what direction you move the object and the perspective of it. Okay, so take about 5 minutes and start moving around objects in your scene just to practice getting a hold of them. This white one, the white circle, allows you to move it just freely. That white circle right there allows you to move it freely. The problem with freely is once you move it freely, it might be in all directions, not just one. You'll see what that means later on as you are moving around objects. Alright, let's look at rotating objects. Click on rotate and you have this widget. It allows you to rotate it in all directions by clicking anywhere. Let's say I click right here on the widget. I can rotate it anywhere. Or I can click on the lines and rotate them in a single direction, X, Y, or Z. Cool, so practice that a little bit. And practice now going between W, moving the object, and then E, rotating the object. Alright, now we're going to look at numeric moving and numeric rotating. So, if you hit N on the keyboard, we now have the ability to rotate things based upon a numeric value. Okay, so you can see here as I rotate it, these numbers change. I can now also move it and you can see these numbers change. And I can then click here with the left mouse button and move this very finitely. Okay, so that's a really good way to, let's say, rotate something at a very small increment, or to be able to change its value altogether. Just keep note that these numbers are changing. What number would be the best is you'll find out. Like we practice or play with these. Try putting sticking to like 0, 90, 180, stuff like that in these, just to see what happens. You can't screw this up, really. Let's say I just put 90 on everything, right? And by highlighting all of these, it changes all of them at once. Okay, very handy. N on the keyboard to get into that. Alright, over here under Edit, we have Undo and Redo. This is a Mac computer, so On a Mac computer, it's Command Z to undo, and redo is Shift Command Z. I always get asked that a lot. So there it is right there. There's undo, and let's say I need to redo it. Shift Command Z, which is a little harder action to go into. Notice that by hitting Shift Command Z, I accidentally went into wireframe mode. Okay? So let's look at wireframe mode for a second. That is Z on the keyboard. You can go into wireframe or solid. Just by clicking on Z, it brings up this little widget. Now, in certain cases, solid, let's say I was really wanting to finite adjust something, I probably could use wireframe a lot easier because I can see my lines. I can line up two things. I can, say for instance, line up these two edges together. Okay, because I'm in wireframe, it's a lot easier to do that. Now they are right on top of each other. If I switch over to another view, I would have to find a view that correlates to these two edges touching. So now they are touching in this view, and now they are touching in this view. And if I went back to Z, solid, you'll notice that object is now resting very well against this object as far as flat surface against flat surface. Cool. So that's using undo and redo, and also how to get into solid and wireframe using Z on the keyboard. Alright, so the last thing we have to cover is just how to save. So File, Save As. Now when you save it, you'll have a complete house. It should be in solid view. Okay, and then when you go to save it, you go File, Save As. You can save this anywhere on your computer. This is the area where you save it, and after you name it something, you hit Save As Blender File. The file format kind of looks like this. In this case, it's House Start Period BLEND for Blender, and it'll have that little icon there also. I can't zoom in on that, but it'll have a little icon that kind of looks like an orange dot with a blue dot in the center of it. Alright, very simple. Now, your mission is to make this house. I've given you everything that you need to perform the action. It is, think of it as a video game. You've now learned the controls, the move, rotate, and scale of the video game, and the moving in objects, the rotating of objects, how to switch to different camera views, and it's up to you to be able to practice it until you get the house done. This file is also included so that you know what the house looks like when completed. Enjoy.